Of course, we're moving on to the issues of state policing now. The federal government and the 36 states have agreed on the need to establish state police to curtail growing insecurity across the country. This was the highlight of a meeting between President Bola Tinubu and governors of the 36 states of the Federation under the aegis of the Nigeria Governors Forum. At the meeting, the president also directed the security chiefs to clamp down on those hoarding commodities and bring them to book. The president and the governors discussed the possibility of improving the numerical strength and training of forest rangers to equip them with improved capacity to keep the country's forests and borders safe. The federal government at the end of the meeting said far-reaching decisions were taken, including consideration of the need for the establishment of state police. According to the government, a constitutional amendment would however be required to allow for the establishment of state police. Well, let's speak with someone who knows a lot about this and now been joined in the studio by Dr. Charles Omole. He's a lawyer, former National Security Advisor to the former Speaker of the House of Reps, Fem Gbajabiamila, who happens to be the President's current Chief of Staff, and he's also the Director and founder of the Institute for Police and Security Policy Research. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
Since last week, we've been reading lots of op-eds, opinions on social media about this proposal. There's a consensus at the highest level of governance in the country on the need to establish state police. Are we really ripe for one?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by state police. And I think that is the greatest challenge at the moment. I think state police has become something like restructuring, where if you ask 5 people, they give you 5 different versions of it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you are talking about state police as in state independently recruiting their own police and managing their own police, we are not ripe for that within the current constitutional arrangement. I mean, I was just told this afternoon rather, visiting a state in the Northwest where the Vigilantes established by the state haven't been paid by the state governor. The state government. So if you can't pay vigilante, it's the police you want to pay. You'll be able to pay. And also, you see, let me put it this way: we should be students of history, and I think looking through history will help guide the listeners. You see, in 1966, Nigeria had 3 levels of policing: the federal police, the regional police, and the local native police. Yeah. When Ironsi became the head of state, there are all kinds of complaints about those police. How, in fact, all the complaints against the Nigerian police today applied in 1966. Now, so what Ironsi did then was he empaneled a group of experts to advise him on what to do. Now, I cited that report many years ago doing one of my research, and that report reads as though they're talking of Nigerian police of today in terms of nepotism, about police being used for brutality, for extortion, bribery, all the normal...
Especially by traditional rulers.
Exactly.
In the north especially, it was,
so all the problems we have today, we had it then. So the experts advised Ironsi then that, look, the only solution they see here is to centralize the police. So Ironsi accepted the report, and then the native and the regional police was sort of combined with the one police. It took them 2 years to do that.
Interesting.
To combine. So it was in 1968 that eventually the amalgamation took place. Now, when Nigerians say one state police, the first question is, number one, are they aware we used to have one and it didn't work? The problems we had today, we had it under that system. So if we understand that we had the problem then when we're talking about state police, maybe we are looking at it differently. And my challenge is, people are talking about constitutional amendment needed to have state policing. I don't think so.
All right.
State-focused policing can take place within the current constitutional arrangement. And it's in black and white. For example, Section 215, subsection 4 of the current 1999 Constitution as amended, says that the Commissioner of Police in every state must obey every lawful order of the governor. Now, and it said must give effect to that order to be, complied with. Now, the last paragraph of that section is now where the problem is. It now says, in relation to the order of the governor,
Yeah.
The Commissioner of Police may, the operative word in the Constitution is may consult the President or the Inspector General of Police, as the case may be. Now, in the operationalizing of Nigerian police, that word may have been turned to must.
Or shall.
Or shall. So that's why the governors feel emasculated. So what needs to happen is very simple. You know, each state, and this can be done by the end of this year, what needs to happen that each state needs to be made to produce a state policing plan. The template for a state policing plan is very simple. You know, it will highlight the crime priorities of the governor of the state and other policing infrastructure that the governor needs. That state policing plan can be produced within 3 months by all the governors. That needs to be sent up to be approved by the Inspector General of Police, who will now send it to the National Policing Council for approval. All that can be done within 4 months. Now, the situation after that now is the instructions, the modus operandi, or what they call a force order, now needs to come out from the IG to say, okay, any instruction given to you by any governor, as long as it's within the approved state policing plan, you don't need to come to me for approval. Just obey it, pure and simple. That will give the governors operational control of policing in each of their states. We don't need constitutional amendment for that. And even if we need constitutional amendment, the truth is, to have state policing in Nigeria will take at least a decade, the way we are looking at it. Constitutional amendment minimum would take 2 to 3 years. That's one presidential term, just to amend the Constitution. Then to operationalize this will take another term as a minimum. So state policing is not something that can happen overnight in that sense. But the suggestion I've given right now can be done immediately. You can have what I call state-focused policing, controlled by the governors, but with the parameters of an approved state policing plan. Yeah. And therefore, the constant coming to Abuja for approval by the CP will no longer be necessary. But more importantly, and this is key, this arrangement will create the checks and balance needed. It will be state-focused policing controlled by the governor, but we have the check of the fact that it's still a federal police.
Yeah, but how about the funding? Because that's where the problem lies. Whoever is providing the funding will, of course, be sending...
the funding will remain as it is right now.
Still from the federal post?
It's still going to be from the federal post. Listen, we can't have state policing unless we have a devolved federation. No state in Nigeria today, not even Lagos, in my opinion, can sustain paying state police the way we say it. Let me explain why.
Okay.
You see, when people talk about state police, they're looking at it purely from the policing angle. Police is part of the wider criminal justice estate in the country. So which means research has shown that only about 15% of crimes in Nigeria are reported to the police. Let's assume that as a result of state police, the way we said, people are talking about it, 10% more people report crime. That's millions of extra crime per annum in the country. So for every state, that means not only paying for the police, paying more prosecutors, lawyers to prosecute those crimes, paying more judges because more judges will have to be recruited. It means building more courts because there are more courts have to. It means each state now, building more prisons.
Yeah, I mean, which
so it's a domino effect, is what I'm trying to say. Because 95% of crimes in Nigeria are state crimes.
Yeah.
So you have a situation where if you have state police, the way we talk about it, the governor will take on not just the cost of the police, but the attendant increase in cost of the remaining elements of the criminal justice estate. And that is the cost many governors are not factoring.
That's where lies the problem, because we have the correctional service on the concurrent list now. And many states are actually not building prisons. They are relying on the federal government. But let me just read this by Abubakar Sav, who's a retired police commissioner. He said, and I'm quoting him, that the establishment of state police will signal the beginning of the disintegration of the country, as governors will use the institution against their perceived political opponents. And he goes on to talk more. Do you agree with him, actually?
To an extent, yes. And that is why I said the proposition I've just given in terms of how we can do within the current constitution allows for that not to happen. Because it gives the governors the operational control of policing in their state based on the state policing plan. But at the same time, it still gives federal government control of the police because they're still a federal organization. So that creates appropriate balance, I think, for governors to be able to instruct the CPs you know. And what that means, therefore, is it creates the checks and balance in the sense that if the governor gives an instruction to the CP, and the CP see that that's a blatantly political instruction, then based on section 215, section 4, it can still refer that upwards. To say,
IG,
exactly, this is what I'm being asked to do. But if it's a direct law enforcement request that's within the purview of the approved state policing plan, it will just go ahead and operationalize it without needing to, take anything up. So that will also give the governors a test run of what it means to actually manage the police, but without the burden yet of the cost of it.
Dr. Charles Omole, isn't it time for us to be progressive as a country? And I know Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who happens to be Nigeria's president, as one of those people who have been canvassing restructuring and novel ideas while he was in the opposition. And this issue of state police was one of those things. I mean, the progressives, as they used to call their bloc, were always thinking of. And you and I know that if you go to other countries, you have counties having their own policing system, districts even having some sort of, and even if you come to Nigeria here, in estates, large estates, you have that. Universities, you have some sort of security who know that area better. Isn't it similar to the issue of state police, that people within the same locality who understand it very well, rather than carrying a policeman from Abuja or from Kano to Bayelsa, who doesn't even know how to swim, and he's supposed to police a community where you have lots of rivers, seas and oceans around?
You see, I believe as a country we can borrow ideas from other countries, we need to Nigerialize it. Okay, let's take United States as an example. They have about 18,900 police departments in the US. Everybody have their own police, universities, counties and all that. But one thing is clear. Under the Homeland Security Act, all the data of all those police departments has to be stored in a particular way. Okay. And every midnight, there's a batch program run by the Department of Homeland Security and harvests data from all those police departments to a central place.
Interesting.
So which means even though they have their various policing department, if you commit a crime in Texas today and you're in Washington 2 days later, the Homeland Security will know you committed a crime in Texas. So that came after 9/11, experience there. So which means even though the operation, they have different police departments, there's a centralized element of it. Otherwise, if you do something in state A, they have only one small view of it. Let me give you a practical example. You went to state A to buy 5 kilograms of fertilizer. 5 kilograms is now, you say you're a farmer, but you did that in 6 other states. Each of the states only knew you bought 5 kilograms. Homeland Security will know 2 days later, hold on a second, that's 5 kilograms in 6 states. That's a lot of fertilizer. What's this guy up to? So each state cannot join the dots on their own. So it takes that central, and part of the challenge we have in Nigeria is disparate security outfits are competing instead of cooperating.
Isn't that the reason why we have ONSA, the Office of National Security Advisor? And we've seen new buildings popping up at the ONSA complex and all of that. Aren't we supposed to be aggregating all this information from all the policing system and other paramilitary agencies? You see, look, according to National Security Agencies Act, the National Security Advisor is a coordinator of national security. That's in theory. But there's no law in Nigeria right now that compels any agency to share intelligence. Interesting.
I mean, you've been in meetings where DSS or police at the we said, we're not sharing that with the police, we don't trust them. So there's no duty, no legal duty to share intelligence. They do out of best practice, out of esprit de corps, out of maybe best interest of the country. But so that can easily be changed either by law or by a executive order of the president that said it's not a crime. You are committing a crime if you don't share intelligence. But there's no such thing. So they share only what they want to share. So the National Security Advisor sadly sees only what they want him to see.
All right. If we do go ahead with the state police because of political reasons, because the nation says after all of this insecurity, it's time for it, do you think that that could also be politicized and there will be a problem between state policing system cooperating with the federal agencies in terms of information sharing?
There will be. Some will say maybe that's part of what we need to learn to grow our democracy. Even in the US, where on advanced country, there are tensions. But because they have strong institutions that's able to manage those tensions. I mean, for example, state police doesn't mean there's no federal police. There are certain crimes that are instantly federal, you know, even in the United States. I mean, if you commit a crime in one state and you move to another state, that becomes a federal police matter because it's now interstate. So because no one state can look after that. Yeah. You know, there are certain crimes that are instantly federal. So you will always need the federal police. But the challenge here is, can they cooperate? And number two, can they be properly funded by the states? And number three, can they actually work in a way that respects each other? You see, part of the problem we have in Nigeria is this idea that every state must have some things equally. That's not true. I mean, you look at New York, you see how many police officers, they go to South Carolina, they don't have 20% of numbers they have in New York. Each state pays for what they can afford. But there's this thing in Nigeria that everything must be, you know, equally shared. And that, I think, is a problem. So some states inevitably become more secure than others. The issue of the politicization of the police will inevitably happen, because that's already happening right now, even under the federal police.
All right. So one of the issues that we also have is that there are proposals for those who are proponents of the state police, that those states that can actually afford to pay for state police should be allowed to go ahead with the state police once there's a constitutional amendment, while the states that don't have the capacity to pay for state police should still retain the services of the federal police in their states. Do you think that's something that will actually work?
No, that's going to be difficult. That's going to be difficult to operationalize. If you have a constitutional amendment that gives states, power to establish their own police, I can bet you every state will establish one.
Well, for those who can afford it, if Zamfara, for example, can afford it, and they decide that they still need the federal police.
I've just given you an example. They didn't establish a vigilante group and they can't pay the vigilantes. Right now, I just don't want to mention the states. You know, so if you can't pay vigilantes and it's the police that you want to pay. So that's why I'm saying that if we are looking at state police from a perspective of a devolved, a political settlement, where we go back to what it used to be, states now have a lot more resources. Yes, under fiscal federalism approach, yes, state police will work. But what I'm saying is that state police cannot and will not work in Nigeria if the current political structure remains the same, where you have a very strong center that takes practically all the money and then does distribute to states. At the end
so funding is the problem, actually.
Funding is a major problem. You see, and the other thing also is, I think Nigerians, we just want peace. And they've been sold that state police will give them peace. So they are canvassing for it. Look, it's like in the 80s, 90s, when people are campaigning for creation of more states. People say, we'll develop better when there's more states. But we know that that's not true.
So it's become an illusion, actually, at some point.
Exactly. Because if your federal budget is 1.2 million and you have 12 states, that means each state gets 120,000. If you have 24 states, your 1.2 million is still the same. You're not giving them 60,000 each. How does that develop you better? But people wanted their own states, but that has not led to development. So the same thing with the state police. People think it's a panacea, and they are tired of insecurity. So anything that appears to give some answer, people are going for it. But if you want to be practical about it, this approach, the one I've just suggested, we give state policing faster, we can have state-focused policing faster. That can happen by the end of this year. And that doesn't stop the actual state policing from happening. It's just that other state policing is more of a medium-term venture. Because to change the constitution, this old first Ashwaju term, got constitutional changes at least 2 years. So this term, forget state policing this term, all they can do is change the law. Yeah. Then the next term cannot be used to now operationalize. So it's not an immediate thing, is what I'm saying. It will take time. But in the meantime, how do we secure our states while that is going on? That is where this hybrid state-focused policing, federal police, state-focused.
Well, very interesting perspective. But there's something that's ongoing just before we end this chat that I want you to actually define. It looks like a form of regional policing, but in a lower level. So you go to the southwest, they are talking of Amotekun, Ondo, and other states. You go to the northwest, they are doing what they call community vanguard, security vanguard. And then some states in the North Central too are beginning to come together. So you have the regional blocks, Northwest Governors Forum adopting that approach, Southwest Governors Forum adopting that approach, South-South and all of that. Could the regional blocks actually form something that can work from a regional perspective rather than individual state perspective, and it will still work?
It can and it must, because even if we have state policing, there has to be deep cooperation among them. I mean, part of the problem, for example, we have insecurity in Nigeria as a whole, take Niger State, is the bandits or the terrorists who will come to Niger State, commit the atrocity, and they disappear to the neighboring country. You know, and that is, again, for example, that's part of the problem. Nigeria as a country is surrounded by only French-speaking country. Why come our police, our military do not have a dedicated tactical team that speak French, that are bilingual? We don't. So how do you gather intelligence from those who are speaking French? You know, when you don't, when you know, you can't speak it. And because of that lack of synergy between us and the neighboring states, so they can commit crime here and disappear. So imagine committing crime in FCT and you run to Kaduna after you commit your crime. So there has to be a very close working relationship between states, even if that happens. Even if they have state police is what I'm saying. So if some of regional blanket, it's not a bad idea. But you cannot legislate for a regional outfit when there's no regional government.
That's an interesting perspective. And just quickly before I let you go, let's talk about VIP protection, which is taking a lot of regular policemen away from the federal police that we have. How soon can we resolve that problem where you have about 150,000 policemen being taken out of the 350,000 policemen? And of course, we are asphyxiated because of this rich man syndrome.
Actually, I mean, you have to commend the current IGP. It's one of his priorities when they came on board, that he wants to, there is a unit within the police called this SPU, Special Protection Unit, and their job is to guard VIP. So the legitimate need of VIPs to be protected is not in question. But the problem is VIP started requesting mobile police officers instead of SPU officers, because they feel mobile is more, they're better trained and they're more muscular, so to speak. So what this current IG announced I wanted to do is to remove all the mobile police officers from VIPs, replace them with SPU officers, and then use the mobile police officer as a core of the special intervention squad. Which, of course, in Nigeria, they don't want to lose their police officers. So that's the challenge he has at the moment, which is withdraw those mobile officers for this special intervention squad and allow the SPU to do what they were trained to do, which is VIP protection. But that, it's work in progress.
All right, Fumo, thank you so much. I mean, it will take a lot of political will for the IG to want to do that. I must have the backing of the president, because, I mean, it's not really easy taking such decisions. Fumo, thank you so much, Dr. Charles Omole, for always being there. For us, he was a former special advisor to former Speaker of the House of Representatives on national security matters. And of course, he's a lawyer and an international policing expert. We must thank you so much for being on the program to help us understand all these issues. And we just hope that once this state policing issue is settled, Nigerians will actually have security, because that's all we are yearning for. Well, that's how it's been for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thank you for watching. I'm Somna Sambo.